Hello guys, welcome to the Improving Season podcast with me, Pascal Flo, and on the other end it is, as always, the Steve Hall.
I was hoping that you were going to go, and on the other end, the Destroyer of Worlds. I was waiting for this introduction.
Yeah, but I'm not as creative for something like that to just come up with that. I'm not Mike, for example. We just talked about Mike. Oh. He's someone who just comes up with that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, I have no idea.
This is my head as well. Whenever I hear people talk that creatively on the spot, I'm just like, I wish I was as cool as you, because I'm so boring. I'm just like, and yeah, I have nothing entertaining to say.
Yeah, especially in such a scenario when it's like, okay, say something cool. Right on the spot, nothing. Right, as if there's nothing in your head anymore.
This is exactly my response. I get I will literally just. That's why I think I probably was never good at drama. I was just always like, can't do it. It
could be such a good scene from something like I don't know, Family Guy or so, where they switch over to inside the brain, and then they're sitting just a guy and be like
twiddling his thumbs,
something like that, right?
This is actually
what do you want from me now? I have nothing to offer.
This is so off topic, but this is so random. The other week, I don't know what was happening, but Charlotte had like music on, and then she was like, let's do some, like, I don't know what you call it, just like off the cuff dancing, just like, she was just doing this weird dancing, and I was like, just standing there like, I've got nothing. I just, as soon as I start going, I just
You've been to a wedding, haven't you? You've been to a wedding.
Yeah, we went to, big shout out to Dan Smith, one of my clients, but he's an absolute mate, and he's a great guy. It was really great seeing him, actually. It was his wedding. We weren't invited to the wedding day. Fuck him. No, that's fine. We're invited to the wedding evening, which was really cool. I've only been to, for my like weddings, it's either Charlotte's friends or it's been my sister's. I've never been to like a wedding or wedding party that's like one of my own friends. So it was quite nice to go to that. And he was so happy to see us there, which was really cool to see him. But we literally knew no one else. It was just Dan. And I'd met Ashley once before, which is his now wife, who is lovely. So yeah, we just kind of ate a bit of food, had some wedding cake, which is the best cake in the world, by the way.
I never had wedding cake.
It's always so good. I don't know why.
Because the weddings I've been to, so maybe it is because I was, the guys who got married weren't really in a position to afford some big parties or so. It was always like in a small circle or just like a regular get-together party kind of thing, with a couple of drinks, sometimes not even catering and stuff like that, right? So there wasn't really just a wedding cake. And I don't know if it differs significantly to how they celebrate weddings in the US. And I could imagine it is, because basically to every single wedding I've been, it was just like, just get together with a couple of friends. And that's basically it. Nothing really that big of a deal, right? So I would assume that was kind of the same there.
They're quite a big deal, I think. At least the weddings I've been to, it's like a whole day. Like you have the ceremony and you have, what do they call it? They call it wedding breakfast, when it's actually like dinner. And then you have like, I don't know. And then you have the after party, or you have like the wedding party in the evening. So it's like the wedding as an event is really drawn out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, in it for itself, also for close friends and family and stuff like that, they are probably then participating at either the church or wherever they are actually getting married. But I mean, just the party in it for itself, where the friends are then invited and stuff like that. I've never been to a really just like huge thing that you are always seeing like in the movies or so. Never been to anything like that. It was always just like in the garden, have a couple of drinks or so, or in a club, in a rented club or so. That was basically it. But it could also be because my friends are piss poor. So yeah. Dan had like a nice suit on. He had they'd invested in this wedding. I'd say it's a very nice venue and really nice. It was super nice. And to reflect on that, it was actually I guess after we got home at
2 in the morning, just after 2 in the morning, ended up getting back. So I didn't get to bed till about 3. So that impacted my sleep quite a bit. And it's so weird once you're so used to feeling like how you feel with good sleep. Once you get like it out of whack, it hits you and you're just like, and that's when I became, until yesterday, really dependent on like stimulants to get me through the day. So then the Saturday night was also someone's 30th birthday. So someone I used to work with, it was his 30th, and I got back a bit earlier. I left, Charlotte didn't get home till like 4 a.m. I left at 11 and got home at 12. I got home at midnight.
I don't even remember the last time I've been out
I know.
that long. It's crazy because that was the norm for me back in the days, right? Like 4 in the morning was just normal to be up. And now it's just like unimaginable. And sometimes I'm even getting up at 4. And that's not really uncommon anymore. So crazy. I don't know.
I can remember, it hasn't happened like I don't know how many years now, but like being out and then it starts getting light when you're out. That is weird. So
that was always the highlight, actually.
It's just like especially no point sleeping.
Yeah, especially like in the summertime. Then just like quite spontaneously getting some drinks and just sitting down in a park or on, I don't know, at the water or so, just relax there and enjoy the sun rising. That is actually quite a nice thing to do.
And then you're just shattered the rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's taken me a while to get back into like that circadian rhythm that the body loves to be within. And obviously I posted a while ago that infographic saying like get to bed within half an hour of your usual sleeping time. Even for someone like me, who I'd love for that always to be achievable, but it's just not always achievable. You just do your best to get back to that. So the last couple of nights I've been back at like getting to bed at like just after 10, which is good. And actually I said to Charlotte a lot this morning, I'm actually on occasion sleeping through an entire night. That was never something like, and it's just happened and I haven't really thought about it. Whenever I hear people say, oh, I slept through the entire night, or like, oh, I woke up once and I normally sleep through, and I'm just like, oh, fuck you. How the hell do you do that? I actually have been sleeping through almost an entire night, which is mad.
That only happens to me when I'm really just like totally smashed, like extremely tired. Other than that, I'm always getting up like once or twice to pee. And funny enough, I'm always, so now that I'm together with Katie, I have always someone to report back to me that I'm always talking. Always. So I always heard it from like my bandmates back in the days. So when we've been on the road together, they always said like I'm talking and when I'm sleeping. But now that I'm always having someone on my side, she can definitely report back to me like, okay, yesterday you talked again during sleep, and it seems like I'm doing it constantly.
I think there are some apps now that you can like put like under your pillow and it records you snoring or talking. Yeah. That'd just be freaky. I've done that on occasion. I think it's normally when I'm stressed, when I start talking or doing something.
But then I would be chronically stressed because so basically every single night that happens.
Does she say what you're saying?
Yeah, she has noted it down somewhere because she finds it funny.
In English or in German?
Sometimes even in English, funny enough. So yeah, I think it always depends on what I've been through throughout the day. And then I'm just like, I try to, I don't know, cope with that during nighttime. I don't know enough about sleep and the stages to actually say what's going on there and why some people tend to actually talk. While Katie, she's dreaming so much. She's always like reporting, hey, this night I dreamt this again. And I hardly ever remember what I've been dreaming about. And she is always like, every single night she tells me about her dreams, which is crazy. And also that she's realizing that she's dreaming while she is asleep. And I'm someone who's just talking, but hardly ever dreams, or at least I can't really remember what I'm dreaming about.
And I always like people then can diagnose your dreams as if like you're dreaming about something and that means something. I think
Freudism has been debunked like a lot of times. And I
was hoping someone might be able to. I actually remember a bit of my dream. Last night I was on a boat and a wave came and it was like beautiful weather and a wave just came and then the boat was sinking and then I woke up. That's what I can remember. Super interesting.
With Kate Hudson. No, what's her name again? The girl from Titanic.
Oh god, I have no idea. I'm the worst for names.
But you know who I mean, right?
Mean.
It's not Kate Hudson, I think. Right?
Maybe.
I don't know. Fuck that. But yeah, so cool. I just, so when we've been talking about dancing, that's why I thought about your wedding, and just wanted to bring that up as well.
Yeah, we didn't dance actually. I think it was because we didn't really know anyone, so it was just Charlotte was like, "Do you want to dance?" I was like, and she was like, "Actually, I don't want to dance either." Yeah. So it's just like,
I had so funny enough, like last year, I went to a wedding with Katie. It was one of her best friends, right? And she has this big group of girls that are always getting together. So her best friends, and I didn't know anyone, and it was the first time I met all of her friends and their boyfriends and stuff like that. And I was just like sitting there, wasn't really into dancing, and they were just like dancing the entire time. And I was just like a little bit uncomfortable because it was more about them.
Yeah.
And now I'm the new guy there. And I don't know. I mean, you could just don't give a fuck about that. But at the same time, I don't want to be that absolute weirdo when I'm meeting her best friends for the first time. And then like, hey, what's up with that guy? I mean, it's cool, but at the same time, it's a little bit weird. I don't know.
Yeah, Charlotte always forces me to dance with her at these things because I would just sit there and twiddle my thumbs and just watch. I'd be happy watching them dance. So yeah, the only other interesting thing, I guess, from the wedding was clothes just don't fit me anymore. Like tailored clothes, they just don't. It's just horrendous. It doesn't.
What a luxurious problem to have.
It does make you feel, it made me feel really uncomfortable though. Normally I feel quite comfortable in my own skin at the moment, like being quite heavy and big for me. But that made me feel like, I was like, oh man, I actually feel like a soggy mess.
You looked like someone from the Father and Sons ads over on Facebook and Instagram. Where it's like, just too snug. And that's coming from a guy who was always wearing skinny jeans back in the days and just like the tightest clothing there was. But even me looking at the Father and Sons ads is just like, okay, that is extra level of snug. I mean, and the comment section is just hilarious. I
just need to I think it's quite an American style to wear like very loose suits and like loose fitting stuff, and that's kind of where I wanted to go, but it just doesn't really do you justice, or like it doesn't look particularly smart. I don't think.
No,
it's a middle ground.
Also not my style. I mean, I like it to be snug, but I mean, like that Father and Sons, these ads are just like
it's Under Armour tightness.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, just read through the comment section and they are making the most hilarious jokes about those kind of things, and I don't even need to come up with those, but like, what are these knobs made of, or I don't know, so many things. I mean, yeah.
Facebook advertising gets so many trolls when you see My Protein and they're like athletes, and it's like just these women doing like kickbacks, or like she's doing a press up but we're zooming in on her bum. It's just like, yeah, we know what you're doing, My Protein. We know.
It's crazy.
So how has your week been? What's happened on your end?
A huge disappointment. It happened here today. So you remember we talked about the Fruit Loops last week, which was a really important discussion to have, in my opinion, right? And then I decided to actually give it a try and bought the unicorn box. And so I had the Fruit Loops from the US just like 2 weeks ago, right? And they tasted like back in the days, or at least that's how I remembered Fruit Loops to taste like. So I bought that unicorn box, and it didn't taste as Fruit Loops at all. And I even gave some to Katie, and she was just confirming my thoughts. It was just like, I don't know, so bland. I don't know what is going on there. But I also heard then, because I did a little bit of research, that Kellogg's, at least in Europe, they are trying to reduce sugar and salts in that. And maybe that has an impact on just like the overall palatability, which makes sense. I mean, yeah. And yeah, huge disappointment. And other than that, trying to modify my motorbike. It's going well though. It's so surprisingly well. I'm now, so I just signed a contract for a community garage where there are other people just trying to have the same hobby, same interests about motorbikes. Some people are more advanced in modifying the bikes. Some people are just, such as me, getting into that, but you can always then interact with them, get some help there, talk with them about your project, and then you can actually do it together and all that kind of stuff. So basically having a community there. And yeah, I signed a contract for that one so that I have a space there to modify my bike. And that's basically what happened like in my private life. Other than that, in regards to training, training week 3 and trained my lower body today, and I felt like not ready for that. I should have taken a rest day and do it tomorrow, but I was, because the bridge that connects my gym to my street basically is closed, so I'll have to drive or ride around that, which takes me an additional 20 minutes to get to the gym. And when I was at the gym, I was just like, no fucking way, I'm now going back home without having trained. So I just sucked it up and did the training session, but I can definitely feel it here today. Definitely feel it. And also just the previous days, I think I was a little bit dehydrated, just because I needed to ride around with my motorbike a lot of times, because I had several different appointments. So getting my hair cut at the same time, having another long-term ECG to get my heart checked at a different clinic. And they wanted to do another one. So I needed to pick that one up and bring it back again, which is a 40-minute ride through the city. And this in a temperature of around 34 degrees Celsius. It was just like, holy shit. In that entire clothing of motorbike clothing was just dehydrating me a lot, while at the same time also training in that humidity and all that kind of stuff. It was just like really exhaustive. And yeah, so next week, hopefully I will be able to push through week 4, but it's just like, this is how a week 4 should be, right? It should be a little bit daunting and scary, but you should also know that if you really get your ass up and really into the mindset, then you can push through it. And this is where I'm at the moment. I think that, of course, I can survive that. It's just about me getting out of my comfort zone and just do the fucking thing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, we're in sync. We're both in week 3 now.
Oh,
yeah. We're normally not. We're normally all over the place.
But it's probably because I had to cut that one mesocycle short, and you did a 5-week mesocycle.
Yeah, I've been doing 5 weeks. I don't know how long they've been going for now, but maybe the last like 3 or 4 hypertrophy mesocycles have been 5 weeks long. I'm hoping this one could be 5 weeks as well. We'll see. But it'll just be a case of, can I actually edge out another productive week of training? And I have to be really honest with myself when I say a productive week of training. It's not just going in and repeating performance, because for me, that's not productive. I prefer to have each week some progression going on for the most part, if possible. It's interesting what you said about kind of taking the rest day as well, because sometimes I feel like that, where I'm like, I maybe should take a rest day. But more often than not, I go into the gym and I end up just being fortunate enough to have a decent enough session.
Yeah, but that happened in the past to me as well. But I think that I got to a point where I can really just tell, okay, this is not going to happen here today. I don't know, probably it's also here that experience comes into play. Because I could already tell from the get-go, I'm simply not feeling ready. Not from a muscular perspective, but more so from a neurological perspective, right? It's just, I don't know. Sometimes you can just feel it. It's really hard to describe. I don't know.
And actually, have we gone over? I don't know, but I think we have. You're doing 6 days per week, and you're doing legs, push, pull. Is that right? Pull, push, legs, pull, push, legs. Just because, I wanted to bring up my upper body. I think that this is more so the one that is lagging behind. Could also possibly be because of the body fat distribution, because my legs just still look quite good. And in the right lighting, I see even some feathering in my quads, which is nuts because
I mean, my upper body just looks flourish.
Flourish, I love that.
Yeah, don't know. It's so crazy. So that gives you sometimes the perception, of course, that your upper body is lagging behind, but maybe it's just like a body fat distribution thing. But at the same time, I just want to have a white bag. And that is what what I've been working for, like, over the past 1 to 1.5 years now, or even now close to 2 years, and it really pays off. It really pays off, and it's just cool to have a lat spread where it's like truly a lat spread, and not just like as if there's nothing there. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, you've seen it back in the days with me. It was just like trying to flare, nothing pops out, nothing.
I've been there myself, like the SpongeBob look, where you're just square up and down. Yeah. I still feel like a little bit like that, but if I push my hips really far back, I give myself a taper, so it's all right.
But slowly, I'm at a point where I'm just like, okay, I'm ready again to now lean down, and I was able to actually keep my body composition in regards to the body fat levels quite stable. I think that I still gained a little bit of muscle mass. Recomp is a clear thing that is even happening to people like us. It's super slow though, and it's nothing I would recommend anyone in doing, but for me it was just like the appropriate thing with all the things that are going on, and with a future perspective of what is in the books here in the next year, and it didn't really make sense for me now with the upcoming child and all that kind of stuff to really commit to a full-on bulking or gaining phase, because I mean, when the child is there, it just goes to crap, and it's probably not going to be effective and productive at all. If you're sleep deprived and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen it that one time, how good of training and progression can be when you're sleeping like a lot. That was the best progress I've ever made. Like, it was unreal, to be honest, right? And when the child comes, I'm expecting that my sleep is going to shit, like proper shit. And then doing a gaining phase during that time, it's probably not the best idea. And I was even contemplating with doing 2 times a day training right now, but doing it for the next mesocycle will only then be 1 mesocycle. Before then, the child will probably come in the next time, and then switching back. It doesn't really matter to only do it for like 1 mesocycle, because you're switching up everything. You are needing to get used to that. Then you're getting accustomed to that. And then all of a sudden you're switching back again because the child is there. Doesn't make sense to me at the moment.
When the child's born, are you going for the child? It's... Wait, Tony. There we go. I can actually... Exactly. This is big for me, remembering names. Yeah, I'm going to remember
Steve.
Tony.
What's going on there?
So, and you won't want to know the way I remember Tony. So...
Soprano.
I think of Fat Tony from The Simpsons.
Yeah, that's all right as well. Both are mafiosis. So,
exactly. What was I going to say? Yeah, you're going to do a primer phase. Is that kind of the maintenance, lower volume? Yeah. That's why you haven't implemented one earlier, because you might have otherwise, I guess. And
probably tapering down to 4 days a week only.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's perfectly... it's lovely when that actually works in, and it's like, you don't feel like you're just... it's always frustrating when you hear of clients, or you hear of people, I guess, who are really pushing for like a hypertrophy or fat loss goal. It's just like, they just don't have the ability to. You could just let yourself do a planned primer phase, a planned low volume phase, and that's actually going to set you up for future success. So, I'm excited for you with that. And then the prospect of also next year, and when we both start getting lean together and this becomes revived to stage potentially again, I guess.
And the thing is that I've made, even though that the off season in it for itself, especially like the transitioning from the last contest prep, wasn't the most optimal. We all know that by now. I've talked about it a couple of times. Even though that this happened, I think that I've made massive strides forward, because also the things about what I talked about like the last time, the mentality, the approach, how I'm training, that I actually now feel like I'm training as like a bodybuilder, and not just like a, I don't know, resistance training guy or so, right? Where it's a mixture of basically everything. And I think that I've made massive strides forward. And I'm really curious to see where my level of leanness will be in comparison to like 2 years with the same amount of kilograms. So like last year when I've been over to London, I think I ended the cut at around 75 kilograms, 75, 76, and I was still far away from actually being stage ready, right? And I'm curious to see where I will be at 75 kilograms now during this time already, because I think that there will be a clear change already. And yeah, I'm just excited and curious. But yeah, you never know what is about to happen, right? I mean, I've talked about it a couple of times, and both times something got in the way. Not really an excuse, but other priorities just, right? Especially with a kid.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%. I think it will be, I don't know, maybe you were 5 kilos out from stage, like maybe less than that, really.
Oh.
So that'll be, really exciting. And I'm the same, like, because body fat in your off season, you don't really know. Like, I'm kind of like, I'm excited to see I don't know. People want normally their upper body to have made loads of gains, but I'm just like, I just hope my quads look way bigger next time I get lean. I'm just like, I really hope they come in sooner than they did last time.
Yeah, funny enough, this is something I've been thinking of myself as well, because with the first contest prep, I was just worried about me not carrying enough muscle mass, right? This is not really a concern I have at the moment. For me, it's more like, okay, I want to get to levels of leanness that are nasty, and I don't know if I'm able to get there with the first time of a contest prep. And that is more in my head right now, because I want to be there where it's just like, fuck, what is happening with you, right? that ultra feathering of the lower back, and also, just like disgusting glutes already. It's not like just a little bit of striations there, but just like walnut glutes. That's what I want, And yeah,
it is tough because I think there's just an amount of experience that pays off, but at least you've got very close, because I think even I've had it with clients sometimes where they've done photo shoots or they've got fairly lean, but it's not still even enough to have a really accurate measure of how lean you need to get. And sometimes you can be surprised by how much some people need to lose or don't need to lose. Like I've had clients where I'm like, whoa, you really got lean without really changing much body weight. And other clients where it's just been like, we really had to take you further than we thought was going to be needed. So at least for me, I've got experience of like, I know I need to get down below 170 pounds to start looking like silly lean. 100% have to get below that. So
I think this time though, I think this time though, for me, I'm in a much better starting position than the last time. With everything, basically also life and everything that is, I mean, the last time I came out or came and still recovered from a massive surgery, was stressed, was sleep deprived, had so many things going on in my life. And also from a body composition standpoint, I was too diet fatigued still from the diets I've been doing before that, etc., right? And this time I'm just in such a better state, just with everything, right? And thus I'm thinking like, okay, this will be a completely different contest prep and a completely different experience than the previous contest prep I've done. And yeah, I think you can't then compare those two with another, because they will be so different. It will look like as if two different people have been doing those kind of contest prep.
Yeah, I think all the listeners who have been with us from the start to now will be able to see that difference as well.
Yeah.
I can certainly see it, and like it just I can only think of something funny to reflect it upon, but the fact you're sick of potatoes,
yeah,
that says a lot in itself. And I mean, the fact you have a support network around you now, you don't just have people online and me overseas, you have actually a family surrounding you who want you and want the best from you. There's going to be stress from that as well, but for the way majority, it's a support network that's going to help.
Yeah, and I think that with that community garage I'm now then in, right? I think that's a really good distractor.
Right.
Like, honestly, I'm having my work, I'm having my family, and then this hobby that will probably take up a lot of my time as well. Of course, only as much time that I'm allowing it to take up. But being at the garage, being fully in that zone of, I don't know, modifying or fixing something, that will probably, first and foremost, make you a little bit active. And second of all, it will take up a lot of time, because things and a project will not be done in just like half an hour. It's not like just cleaning the flat and then you're done. But it's more like, okay, when you're setting yourself a bigger project, it can keep you so distracted that it takes maybe your mind off from food a little bit. And if it just has that minor effect of, or that minor possibility of taking off your mind off of food, that is even already beneficial, right? So I think that having this, having the motorbike, having the family, having you, right? I think that it will be much better this time around.
100%.
And that makes me really excited to just think about it, because I am in such a better spot this time around. And this is something that when we are talking about that, right, it's not just us talking about our situation. It's of course hope in hope for that someone is in the same situation, or in a different situation where they are just like realizing, okay, maybe I should have brought myself into a better position first, right? So hopefully everything we're saying here, there's something that you can take away from for yourself or for your future endeavors or so, right? This is always what I'm hoping for when we are talking about those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Should we get to questions? We've been half an hour self-indulging.
Mate.
I could have kept going.
Yeah, totally. So, Justin, at the start of a mesocycle, how do you go about selecting the weights loads you will use? I.e., if you end the last meso benching 100 kilograms for 8 repetitions with an area of 0, and then you deload, what is the weight you should use for the next meso to get an area of 4 and stay within a good rep range?
Cool. So I have, a way you can definitely go about working this out. In that, it basically, the really short answer is you pick a load that you can land within the rep range and land at your reps in reserve. If you know what your reps in reserve are, say you're aiming for 6 to 10 repetitions or something along those lines, and you know what your 12 rep max is, or an estimated 12 rep max, you can then work back 4 to 3 reps and know that that's going to probably land you within that rep range. And that's the beauty of having a rep range. That's the beauty of reps in reserve, is that you can auto-regulate it. What I would also say is, so you use your past basically logbook, and you've got your last mesocycle, and you can directly use that. You can also auto-regulate it within the session. So I always recommend people start with like the bar, then they work up with 50% of their working weight, and then they go to 65, 75, 85, and then 100% potentially of their working weight, and lowering the repetitions each time so that you're not fatiguing yourself. So you use 100% of what you think you should be able to achieve. If that feels really good, then probably it's a good weight to use. If you feel like, oh, that single, that felt a lot tougher than I was expecting, then maybe just pull it back. And you can always, in that first week, for me, it's always a case of, if you slightly over or undershoot on that first set, like work to the reps in reserve, and if you're aiming for, say, the 6 to 10 and you ended up getting 12 with 4 reps in reserve, you're like, okay, I can increase the load here, maybe by 2.5 to 5 kilos. So maybe you used a couple of loads in that first week, and then next week, you know where you need to be. So I always say, use that first week as like to auto-regulate, to select your weights, and use past data points to give you a starting point. And don't always assume you're going to have got stronger. Most people should have mesocycle to mesocycle, I think, but there's a lot of people who are pretty advanced, who maybe have been using a lift for a while, and it might not have got you might not have got stronger. You might have to pick the same load.
Yeah, I'm always trying, but it hardly ever happens. And if so, only on really just a few exercises. And that's not even me forcing it. It is just like, okay, now I can increase or so, right? It's sometimes when it comes to clients and they ask the same question, I always like that general rule of thumb of looking at the previous meso, week 2 or 3, and asking yourself whether you could do that in week 1 for that giving RER now, right? So probably in week 2 or 3, and at least with the way we are programming, most of the time the ARIA should be at a 3 or at a 2 in that week. And if you want to start at an ARIA of 4, maybe you have gotten stronger, and that should then be, instead of an ARIA of 3, now an ARIA of 4, and maybe you can give a try with that weight that you have been doing in week 2 or 3 of the previous mesocycle. Just another thought that in addition to what you've been suggesting, Steve.
Cool. Yeah, I like it.
Cool. So moving on to the next question, which is a really good question. And that is, funny enough, that is something I wanted to actually talk about. Totally forgot about that though. And now there's the question, what a coincidence. And it's actually perfect timing, because I had one client who was talking about refeeds actually being quite challenging for them mentally, but also physiologically. So Rachel asks, is it normal to feel more hungry during our refeed? It's manageable hunger, but just curious whether you guys have that experience with this. I'm thinking it may just be that I was expecting to feel more satisfied eating at maintenance. Also saw a new low and looking leaner after the second day of my refeed. Could the reduced stress cortisol also play a role? So just to kick it off here, because this is something that is really important to me personally, and I see it all the time that refeeds and diet breaks are constantly promoted, and everyone is just talking about the benefits of that, and hardly anyone is talking about the negatives or the cons or the potential downsides to them, because there are people out there who are massively struggling with refeeds and with diet breaks. And I've been there myself. I'm someone who rather sticks to a caloric deficit than possibly reaping the rewards of a diet break that possibly can happen. We still don't know it. We even had Jackson Pios on the podcast, which came out now on Saturday. So listen to that one. And he is doing even or conducting studies on the field of intermittent dieting, right? And even he says like, okay, we still don't know fully whether it has some positives. It looks like prolonged diet breaks or prolonged days of refeeding may potentially cause some reversal of those negative adaptations, but it's still not really clear as to what extent it does that. And he also talked about it, I don't know if it even was in our podcast or on a different podcast, talks about the negative or potential negative outcomes for certain individuals. And I think it's so important that someone is finally talking about that, because there has been, over the past years, always just been a promotion of refeeds and diet breaks. And if then someone goes out, tries the refeeds for themselves, tries diet breaks for themselves, maybe even sets it up perfectly, right? Like on paper, perfectly, but then fails due to physiological responses or something like that, then they possibly end up in a psychologically compromised situation because they think they are now a failure or they have messed it up or so, and that can just turn into a vicious cycle, right? And yeah, I think it's so, and that is why I wanted to talk about that, because I think that there needs to be a clear distinction that refeeds and diet breaks can possibly even be detrimental for some individuals. And this is something that I think much more people should talk about, because I only see people promoting that, right? And there are just these individuals who simply don't function well with refeeds or diet breaks because they can't control their hunger. They can't control their outburst of just like insatiable hunger, but more so like the cravings they are then getting, right? And for some people, it's simply not the right thing to do. And yeah, I think it's absolutely, so just to answer her question really quickly, I think it can be normal for certain individuals, especially also when you've been dieting for a longer period of time or when you are getting really, really lean. Then some people do expect that a refeed or a diet break will solve their hunger issues. But depending on the level of leanness and depending on the length of the diet, it may be not. It will just be a drop on a hot stone or so, and it will just dissipate immediately again, right? It will make you satiated in that situation maybe, or maybe even not that. And then you're just moving on, right? And maybe it can even backfire on you because you're now having tasted the sweetness of how it is to actually have a higher caloric intake. And the body is just like in a sense of like, okay, this is actually how it feels like to actually get more calories in. Let's ramp up the negative adaptations even more. Like, I want that food and I want it now, and please give it to me. Right. So yeah, it's really important to me that it is also talked about that there may possibly be some detriments for some people.
Yeah, I think it's, I probably haven't talked about them before, probably because I haven't personally experienced them with myself or clients, which I don't know. I just haven't, every single time I tend to use them, they seem to, whether or not, I've certainly experienced it where they make people hungrier. I've definitely had that. I actually recently had that with a client. This is like one of the first times it's happened. It's happened a couple of times, but this is some recent one where he's just been hungrier. And as he gets into the diet, he gets into like a groove and the hunger actually gets less. Kind of like when you start a diet, a lot of people actually like, so it's different results. So some people are just like, oh, I'm fine. And like, it's so nice to eat less. Other people are like, I'm immediately hungry. And it's like, there's psychology involved, there's physiology involved. And like, even with the refeed, it's like, so you've expected to feel less hungry. So maybe that expectation has led you to feel more hungry because you're like, I'm off the diet. It's so individual, completely.
Can I just throw something in? Just so that I don't forget about it. And that is with the diet break. So I've always planned it for myself when I did like prolonged cutting phases, right? And once I got into the groove of things, of cutting, it was so easy to stick to my macros. I didn't really feel hungry at all. It was just an easy ride. But once I got into the diet break, sometimes it was just like, I don't want to do the diet break. Everything is going well, but I know I'm using it as a preventive tool, because usually the general rule of thumb is you don't want to take a diet break when it's absolutely needed. And that's why I always was justifying then to taking a diet break and saying like, I don't really want to, but I know it's beneficial. And this is what I'm talking about. People have only been talking about the benefits of that, right? Or the potential benefits. I was under the belief of like, okay, I just need to do that because it has so many pros to it. And thus I need to implement that now, even though that I don't feel like it. And nearly every single time I did that, after a week, I had a much harder time to get back into the cutting again. Much harder time. And sometimes even during the diet break, I had a really hard time sticking to my macros, even if I kept it quote unquote clean, right? And I just increased the portion sizes of the meals I've been eating, right? And yeah, this is just something I wanted to throw in there because you've been talking about like the momentum and people having an easy time actually being in a caloric deficit once they are in the groove of things, and then interrupting it with a diet break can actually sometimes lead to them actually falling off the wagon and not taking the diet break.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know they've studied obviously various protocols of diet breaks. I don't remember, and forgive me if I'm wrong, that they've ever reported after the diet break then people, if whether or not, and I don't know if they even looked into it, whether or not people struggle to get back to dieting after the diet break. I've never heard that. I don't know if I asked Jackson in the podcast whether that's, obviously we discussed some of the negatives of diet breaks, but I don't know if that's ever actually cropped up during research, whether it's something they just haven't investigated.
So just to answer your question, I'm not really certain about that either. But when it comes to the intermittent dieting approach, and one study that is always cited is the Matador study. And the thing is that while it is all good and well to look at that study, it is really not as applicable to our audience as well, right? It is more like just people, right? They don't, most of the time, they don't really have any kind of awareness of macros. They are not really as food focused because they don't really take care of their food that much, right? And thus, I don't really think that it's too applicable to our audience. When you are like trying to get 6-pack lean or so, which can be a challenge for some people already in it for itself, and you are training like really hard 5 to 6 days a week, it just changes everything. Because, and this is something I do remember from myself or my own experience as well, that when I haven't been training, right, which is like already quite a long time ago, I have been losing weight like 2 to 3 times, right? I've been a fat piece of shit when I was young. Then I lost the weight, didn't really know what I was doing and all that kind of stuff. But I was also 14 years old during that time. But then I was in Flensburg, so right before I moved to Berlin, and I drank a lot and got a little bit of a beer belly, right? And then I moved to Berlin and I just wanted to lose the weight again, right? And I lost the weight, but also without really knowing what I'm doing. I know I had to eat a little bit less. And I do remember that I had no issues with hunger whatsoever, but also because I was just like super sedentary and I didn't really crave anything. And if I was to eat something like a quark, it kept me satiated for nearly the entire day, which is definitely not the case now because my metabolism is so much more ramped up now just due to all the physiological processes that are going on. And if you're then training like hard 5 to 6 days per week, I think it just changes the picture completely.
Yeah, and I think an additional point of one of the benefits, at least, of refeeds that are put out there is the kind of glycogen replenishment to allow for better training.
Yeah.
But that's never looked into, like, that's not in the research either. So it's kind of like, it is a fair amount of not guesswork, but it's kind of like looking at these things and trying to apply something that isn't specifically towards our audience to our audience.
I think you bring up a fantastic point that also really leads into what I've just said there. I think that something like a ketogenic diet, which are, so I wasn't really doing a ketogenic diet, but I wasn't really eating a lot of carbohydrates back in the days either when I lost that weight. But because I wasn't really requiring those, right? It was just like, yes, I was walking around. I was feeling a little bit tired due to being in a caloric deficit, but I wasn't really craving that energy, right? Because for what? For walking around. And now it's just like, I want to my trainings to be productive as well. And that just messes with my head. If I'm like massively restricting my carbohydrates, I can feel it. I can see it in my performance and I can experience it when I'm going into the gym, and it doesn't make the gym any kind of fun. That already then correlates to me being effective or like successful with the diet as well, right? And that is one more thing that it made it so easy back in the days to just lose the weight. Let's not talk about whether it came from muscle mass or fat mass, right? It was just losing weight. Right? But now it's just like, okay, we want to just lose the fat while keeping the performance high. And also in that sense, it just changes everything completely. And I think that it was, for me at least, so much easier to lose the weight, just lose the weight back in the days because there were no requirements. I was just like walking a little bit, right? But you don't had any kind of high energy output or any kind of performance that needed to be fueled. And now it's just like, it does. And that makes dieting also a little bit harder because when you're then in the gym, you're just feeling like shit because you're absolutely depleted. It makes it challenging and harder.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think that was well answered. I was just thinking it through at that time. I was like, when was the last time I had a diet break? When I was dieting for the shows in 2017. It's been so long since I've actually implemented one, and I can't remember how they felt back then.
So the next diet I will be doing, and I said it already to myself because the previous diets I've always been doing where I took a diet break, I was always derailing afterwards. Not like massively, it wasn't like going fully out of control, but it was just making things harder for me to get back on track. And I think that if I just sucked it up, I could have easily made more progress and had a better successful outcome. And for the next diet I'm planning, I will not be implementing any kind of diet break, at least not like just a week or so. If at all, then a prolonged time of maintenance where it is then maybe something like 4 weeks together with a primer phase or so, right? To really make it dissipate and also to really let the diet fatigue come down. absolutely reap the rewards of a diet break, prolonged diet break, and then be at a point maybe where you're really just not hungry at all anymore, and then going back into a cutting phase where you just had that prolonged break where it's just not like, okay, I can still sense the diet being around, and I don't want to go back into a caloric deficit because eating a little bit more is just like a little bit nicer, right? And it's just like that 1 week or those 2 days are always just a little bit of a reminder how good that time was. It is like as if you're coming out of a relationship, and you are still absolutely in love with that person, and that person split up with you, and you are always having and seeing like pictures, hanging around, watching videos. You're still following that person online, and every single time you are taking a look at the pictures or the videos, you're always getting like a reminder of how beautiful that person was, how cool it was to be around that person, right? And you're just torturing yourself. And this is how I perceived it as well. Like with a refeed, you're just getting a glimpse of how nice it is to have a little bit of a higher caloric intake and feel just a little bit more energetic, and have most of the time then a better performance afterwards in the gym, instead of always just feeling like a miserable piece of shit. But sometimes it's just better to swim in that pool for a little bit, and just like absolutely suck it up, and then probably at the end you feel better. Same analogy with the relationship. Sometimes it's just better to cut ties like altogether for 2 to 3 months, and then come back and have like a discussion with that person or so, because then you're probably emotionally detached from that situation and you can cope with that much more rationally. And the same probably applies to a caloric deficit as well, that at some points the emotions come into play as well.
Yeah, I'd be interested to also hear how your performance is, if that gets impacted at all, just because obviously that's part of the diet break, is like that glycogen replenishment. So it'll be interesting to see.
Cool. So moving on to the next question. That is from Dali. How much more of a difference does tracking macros make compared to taking the basic protein and calories approach for both gaining phases and cutting phases?
So the basic calorie and protein approach, I don't know how that's not tracking macros. If you've got awareness of those two, that means that you have an element of tracking. I don't know if there's something I'm missing there. Does he just mean not tracking all of them?
Yeah, and that is what I've been more and more implementing with a lot of my clients as well, giving them in a gaining phase or maintenance phase a much wider range of carbohydrates and fats. I always want them to be in a close range of their protein level and also caloric targets. But especially in a gaining phase and in a maintenance phase, I'm saying that what I have even some clients that is a little bit of an experiment where I'm saying like, okay, carbohydrates and fats, go by feel. Still, I want you to just not take all of the macros from fats alone, because of the things that fat, of course, then do in a gaining phase. It's much more easy to store as fat, and also carbohydrates fuel your workouts and help you with your recovery. But I think at the same time, when you're someone who's eating like 400 grams of carbohydrates per day on average, sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes a little bit higher, I think that you will probably meet all of your glycogen requirements for optimal progression, because what we know so far is that bodybuilding and the way we train is not really as glycogen demanding, and thus I think having a much wider variety and flexibility is probably appropriate, I think.
Yeah, if that, I assume that must be what he's asking, because otherwise the question doesn't really make sense. It's like, so having specific targets versus just a protein and calorie track, basically. And I certainly have clients who have that. And I also implement, like you said, just wider ranges. So a lot of the time I'll have like a lower threshold for fat and a higher threshold, which is like, I don't know, there could be 40 grams easily between the two. And then it just means that, okay, you have a nice wide threshold for fat. Anywhere within there, I'm very happy for you to be. The high end's quite high. The low end is as low as what I'm happy to go, like 0.3 per pound most of the time, which is exactly what I implement for myself as well. And a lot of them, I just say, where possible, if you want to, edge towards the lower end of fat and the higher end of carbs, because there seems to be some good theoretical rationale where that might be a great thing for you. But it's not always the way people have to go. Preferences and longevity are important too.
This, and also, if you haven't bought the seminar, the London seminar yet, see up in the corner, you can actually find the link to that now. So James Hoffman was talking about athlete tier levels. So he talked basically about 4 tiers. There's one time the professional bodybuilder, which probably none of us is. Then we have the professional, who takes bodybuilding really seriously, who is competitive, but doesn't make a living off of that, right? Then we have just like the recreational lifter who wants to look good and all that kind of stuff. Then tier 4, I can't even remember tier 4.
I think it was like the gym rat, and then the last one was like the fitness enthusiast or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I think that most people will not fall into the spectrum of the first two, the professional and the professional. Right? And if you are falling into the tier of 3 and 4, I think that there is not really that much of an argument to make for a high carb, low fat massing. So that's what I prefer as well, but more so just because I tend to just eat like that automatically. It's not like that I'm saying like, okay, this is optimal or so. But if there is something optimal, or a slight optimality about that, I will very well do that, because I mean, we are coaches. This is what we are making our living off. It's not competing in it per se that we are making a living off of that, but I take it very seriously.
We're professors.
And yeah, and in that sense, I can see a validity of taking care of the macros to that much of an extent. However, if that's not you, I think you don't have to be on 500 grams of carbohydrates and only 40 or 50 grams of fat. And I don't think that you necessarily have to track those macros as well. As long as you're taking in adequate amount of carbohydrates on average across the week, average amount of fats across the week, and then tracking your protein and overall calories, I think you're absolutely in the golden zone.
I agree. I think a lot of people would benefit from hearing James's presentation, especially our audience.
Absolutely.
Because I think
Funny enough, and this is something that I've just realized afterwards, how valuable that presentation was, because I was already talking about that and citing him like 3 times in client check-ins. And like there has been a client that went out, had a couple of drinks and stuff like that, but he is on a cutting phase and stuff, right? Where it was just like, okay, hey, mate, if that's you and if that's important to you, then that's absolutely fine. You just have to realize that the weight loss is probably slower, but that's totally cool. Because if you are falling into the category of tier 3, then life is important to you, right? And you want to actually participate in stuff like that. And then the trade-off of you losing a little bit slower the weight is totally cool and acceptable, right? And yeah, I think that presentation was absolutely golden, and I wish that more people would honestly take a look at that and not just be like disillusioned and thinking, no, I'm the professional, or even I'm the professional. I am the professional. No matter what you're saying, I am the professional, right? But like absolutely with being open and honest for new suggestions, and also honest with themselves and saying like, watching it and be like, oh yeah, I always thought that I'm the professional, but maybe I'm just tier 3, which is absolutely cool. It isn't like one is better than the other or so, right? It's just a matter of where do you see yourself and what's important for yourself. And we really like more people to watch that presentation and be like, all right, I don't have to actually be like that. So implementing all the professional things, but all the professional things, but actually I'm just like a tier 4 athlete or so. So yeah, I think that was a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, I think it will just help open a lot of people's eyes to what's appropriate for their level and their goals and what's realistic for them. And some people really enjoy doing the professional things, which is fine. And I think you can be on a spectrum where maybe when you have the ability to, it's low stress for you, you can be like a professional for a few months. If you've got like a summer vacation, you can just dominate it and that's what you want to do. But then you can realize that when you've got other things, when you're a student or something, you've got parties you want to do and stuff, like live your life, unless you're actually like going to become a professional bodybuilder and that's like your absolute all-time dream. Most people would warrant being within that range most of the time, I think.
It's so this is so funny because I see myself as a really rational person, and I think I even talked with you about it like recently, where sometimes I simply can't understand people. That's also the reason why I'm still interested in studying psychology, because I would really like to understand people and why they behave and act the way they do, because sometimes I simply can't understand it from an emotional perspective. I know that when it comes to coaching, empathy is a really important piece. And I think that this empathy is also a little bit of a skill that you can learn. At least that's my opinion, because I don't think that I'm a truly empathetic person. I've heard it from a lot of girls in the past that they couldn't really see through me and understand me, because I'm just sometimes having a blank face when actually it should be a little bit more emotional, or when I'm saying something, it's just like absolutely rational and saying like, okay, this is what it is. And I don't even notice it myself that there's anything wrong with that. However, sometimes the other person expects a more emotional response or so, right? That's why I'm super interested in psychology, and also like behavioral psychology, especially why people act the way they do. Anyway, what I wanted to say though is when it comes to like the mindset of wanting to do the things of a professional, but actually not being one, I simply can't understand that. For me, there's no rationale behind that, right? And that's where I'm really having issues of being like, why are you doing, or why are you living a life that is so restrictive when you don't have to, because you are not that person? I don't know, right? And that is where I'm coming to a limit of my, I don't know, imaginary abilities, because I simply can't fathom that. And that's just me being absolutely honest here. That's not so maybe that is even my problem, that I'm not able to actually realize what's the intention behind it, that I can't understand it or so. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have high expectations or goals, but I'm just saying like the goals should always also align with reality and what possibly is possible. Because I mean, I'm dreaming of flying, but that's never going to happen. Right? And the same is like, yeah, and the same is something with a professional. There is unfortunately just a huge genetic component to it. And for some people, the majority of people, it's simply not in it for them. And then I can't understand why they are then living the things, the restrictive life professionals are doing, even though that they aren't professionals themselves. I don't see the value in that. I don't see the quality of life in that, because it is such a restrictive life. And that applies to every single professional athlete out there. They are required to do such immense trade-offs and such immense sacrifices, basically, right? This is also applicable to all other huge occupations. When you want to be absolutely the best of the best and super successful, the trade-offs are immense. Right? And then I simply can't understand why you're then willing to take those trade-offs and sacrifices if it's not even realistic that you are getting to that point.
I think this is interesting, because this is probably where our, what's it called? I guess our personalities complement each other, because I'd probably say I'm a little bit less rational than you. I don't think I'm an irrational person, but I think I'm a bit less rational, and I think I'm a little bit more emotional. So I'd say I'm someone who holds their heart on their sleeve. Like, hilarious because I've never seen Charlotte cry. She's probably seen me cry about 5 times or something. And I don't cry a lot, but I will cry. And I do get very emotionally involved with things, and I am an obsessive person. So for something like bodybuilding, I probably too regularly edge towards professional, and I can't rationalize it, but it's what I want to do. And it's just like, it's an obsession and I gotta do it. And I know people that are like that, and I can understand it more so just because that's my mentality as well. Is if I'm going to do something, I'm going to fucking go all in. And part of me is like, it's okay because it's my career. It fits within my lifestyle. I have my priorities in check and it doesn't take away from things. But I'm sure in some ways it probably does. Will I live to regret it in years? Maybe, but would I live to regret not have doing it? I don't know. So I'm, for the most part, can help people in that scenario who I don't think it's applicable for them, but I can't always help myself with that. So I don't know. It's just an interesting one because I kind of see why people end up getting into that because they're just like, well, I want to be the best I can be at that. But it's like, well, perhaps, but that might be like a 1% difference. It might be the trade-off is just too large. Like you said, irrational. Like you look at the pros versus the cons weigh out the pros. So most of the time I'm really good with others. I don't know if I'm always rational enough with myself, but it's an interesting discussion because I kind of see it, but I also completely see how irrational it is.
Yeah, and that is, once again, I just want to reiterate that only because I can't rationalize it doesn't mean that there isn't something to it or you shouldn't do it or so, right? Because we can always take a look from a different perspective and saying like, okay, if that is what truly makes you happy and this is the liberal speaking in me, then go ahead and do that. Right? So these are contradicting views in me already, where it's like, okay, feel free to do whatever you do, what makes you happy. But at the same time, just looking at it with a really rational eye. I can't explain it, but then at the same time, many big accomplishments in in life or in history weren't really rational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say
maybe it first became rational in hindsight.
I will say some of the things that I do that maybe don't seem rational, I think they've helped me get to places that I wouldn't have got to without it. And yeah, I think I rationalize it a lot of the time because of what we do. And that's like, oh, if I can, I don't know, do everything. Like I think Mike recently did a post about it. Like he trains twice daily because he wants to push his physiology to the max so he can learn about it. He's a sports scientist, whatever. And I'm kind of like, well, I can do it. It fits. And if I can learn from it, that's cool. But yeah, it's like, well, what could I be? If you think about it, you spend even yourself, Pascal, 6 times a week at the gym, the amount of hours there, commuting there and back. It's like, what could you have done in that time? You could probably learn 1 million different languages or something, or whatever it might be. But then would that have brought you the same value and love and the same health and all the other benefits that come along with it? It's super hard. Like how do you even qualify
and
that?
I think that you're going down the rabbit hole of philosophy, and you will probably never come to a solution, at least not with my intellect at the moment.
My mind will explode.
I think that probably there are some people who could easily argue with you who have a deep understanding of philosophy, but also like, I don't know, other things or psychology and philosophy, right? Who can then rationalize and just like really well explain to you, okay, this is why you are acting on your emotions, but at the same time, even though that it contradicts your rational thoughts, etc., etc. So there are probably people who could actually argue with you why you're doing the things that you do, even though it doesn't make sense, and it's all right. But for us, it's just like going down a rabbit hole, and we are losing ourselves in that philosophical talk.
I know I may have made myself sound really like crazy, and I'm not that obsessive. Like there's lots of things I do that I could be more obsessive about, but like I don't worry about.
You're not obsessive.
Yeah, I'm not too bad.
No, you're not obsessive. Of course you're not.
Now I need to get more obsessive.
Like Endgame. We all know who the captain is. Of course we know. I'm the captain. Of course you are. Amazing.
Should we call it here?
Yeah, we call it here.
We've been long. Sorry, guys. I hope you've enjoyed our philosophical chat.
So talk to you next week, I would say, right?
Next week. Cheers.
Cheers.